Kim Inspirasi Euforia Islami. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya wal mursalin sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabi ajmain. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and a very good evening to IKIM Radio listeners. You are with me again, Andy Zahura Abdul Aziz, your host for Open Forum. And thank you for tuning in to IKIM Radio and also to those who are watching us through our Facebook page this evening. Welcome to the program. And Alhamdulillah, today we have a special guest with us. We have invited Mr. Mujibu Abdul Muiz. And Mr. Mujibu is actually a senior lecturer of political science at the Faculty of Administrative Science and Policy Studies at University Technology Mara or UITM. And before we proceed further, Mr. Mujibu, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah. How are
Thank you
you,
for
Wanini?
being, Alhamdulillah, thank you for being with us on Open Forum this evening. So
Yeah, most
before we
welcome.
go, right. So before we go to our topic of discussion, which is on the topic anti-party hopping, do voters matter? I would just briefly introduce you to our listeners this evening. So Mr. Mujibu Abdul Muiz, as I have mentioned, is a senior lecturer at University Technology Mara, UITM, and he's based at the Faculty of Administrative Science and Policy Studies. He obtained a Bachelor of BA in Political Science from the International Islamic University of Malaysia, IIUM, and a Masters of Political Science from University Kebangsaan Malaysia, UKM. And currently, you are also a PhD candidate in Political Science at UKM as well. And apart from that, I believe he's well known for his contribution in many media, mainstream media, such as in RTM, TV3, Bernama, and all this mainstream media. And you're also a weekly columnist for the mainstream newspaper, and you have discussed on many issues, not just about Malaysian politics, but also on global issues. Relating to issues, politics, elections, ethnic relations, and international relations. And I believe it is very important for us to know that the topic of our discussion, Mr. Mujibu, is very much current and very much important, so that we have a better understanding of what is going on or what is happening with regard to the current situation in Malaysia. So our topic, Mr. Mujibu, anti-party hopping. In many countries, it is also known as floor crossing. It is also known as party switching and also defecting. So these are the terms which are, some people, they are familiar with this term. And when we talk about what do you call that, our bill, our law, which was passed in Dewan Rakyat, which is, I believe, is one of the major happening in our parliament this week, is actually with regard to this particular what do you call that, party hopping. So if maybe you can give a little background on this anti-party hopping bill, Mr. Mujibu, to our listeners.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to say thank you for the invitation by the IKIM Radio. This is my first appearance with this IKIM Radio. So thank you very much for inviting and having me here to discuss this topic. And of course, this new development has already seen that the politician finally came into a conclusion that we need to rectify the situation. And by meaning of rectification, we need some concrete and substantial law in order to prevent the whatever things that we call with anti-hopping or floor crossing, party switching, so on and so forth. The thing is, it is similar like. But so far, we can simply say thank you and we say congratulations to Prime Minister, because finally, under his guidance and his leadership, he have put this kind of bills as a commitment from his administration, just to make sure that the party switching or party hopping that severely damage our political situation and create instability, not only in the federal level but as well in the state level.
Yeah.
So when the bill is concluded with more than two-third majority, this is kind of commitment. But the most important thing that we need to ask with this bill is whether it is sufficient enough to prevent any future party hopping, since there are
Mm-hmm.
still loopholes, so on and so forth. But for the introduction, I believe that we need to understand that what are the main contents for that particular bills that recently passed by our parliament. There
Mm-hmm.
are two things that I believe become the core of this thing. Number one is now the any MP who defects from its original political party, they
Mm-hmm.
represented during the election and they won under that particular emblems or that particular banner of that party.
Mm-hmm.
When they switch the party, or let's say they become an independent, they are not joining any political party. So by this bill, they are now need to vacate their position and their seat. And of course, maybe we are going to have a by-election on this particular election. And number two, of course, the same thing will be happen to the independent candidates if they are, let's say, joining party A or party B.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, we have a very basic idea on how the so-called anti-hopping law that have been passed by the parliament. But somehow there are exemptions, and this exemption might be a loophole on this particular discussion,
Mm-hmm.
since as I said earlier in the beginning, yeah, whether this particular bill considered to be comprised, considered to be complete in order to prevent any party hopping. No, because these are the exemption. Number one, MP were sacked from their party. Let's say from their political leadership, the political leadership decided that they were going to expel or this particular member is not
Mm-hmm.
going to be applied to the law. For example, if we have in the case of Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin as well as Datuk Seri Shafi Abdal when they were sacked by their respective party UMNO. So that
Mm-hmm.
particular thing does not consider or does not apply the bill. Number two, of course, if the party were dissolved or the party were deregistered by, let's say, ROS, so that particular things are not going to be applied, and the party, if they are dissolved or they have been deregistered, they does not consider to be an anti-hopping party. So what are the things that we are going to look on this thing is, let's say, the biggest loophole is whether the Sheraton 2.0 may be happen, because there is no clear cut on this thing. For example, when some MPs have joining the other collision,
Mm-hmm.
bandwagoning joining, yeah, like say
Yeah.
the Bersatu as well as some Afudi Keadilan members, they're joining the thing. This is not covered in this bill, so we might simply say that there is a possibility for Sheraton 2.0 to be happen again in the next election, having a thought that we are going to have a very tight contestation in general election, and there will be a possibility of nobody will create or command any majority to discuss or to form the government. Well, let's say in the case of confidence and supply, yeah, although there are clauses on this bill, they say that if you are supporting party which is against your party wishes during this confidence and supply agreement, it is also not considered as a party hopping. But I believe that are going to create a backlash in the party background, especially when you are representing a party and that particular support be considered as important to that party, and we're going to involve any disciplinary action further.
Mm-hmm. Right. You have mentioned that there are also loopholes which can actually affect this particular bill with regard to what you have said. Such, for example, bandwagoning of parties into a bigger coalition, or creating a new coalition. You can actually, some sort like showing that there is still to be done with regard to this particular aspect of anti-party hopping. We've got countries like Singapore, like Thailand and Pakistan. These are among the countries that have their own floor crossing or anti-party hopping laws, which they have enacted. And I think when you said that this is something very important, I believe from the perspective of the voters, when
Mm,
we talk about anti-party hopping, we know that in elections, when voters make their decision or choose which party or which candidate,
mm,
there are factors that actually contribute to their choices, to their
mhm.
decision. So maybe you can share someone who's very much into analyzing voters' behavior. I think you've been to many general elections, by elections, and you look at voters' behavior. What actually factors that determine Malaysian voters, especially with regard to their choices in elections, Mr. Mujibu?
Okay. I believe the exact motivations of a voter in voting for a particular candidate or party, which is, for me, it's hard to be measured and very uncertain.
Mm-hmm.
Whether the voters vote during the election for the candidates or for the parties or for the manifesto, or they're just simply following or have been influenced by their peers or by their family, by their parents. This is very difficult to be measured. But
Mm-hmm.
somehow, the voters need to do the decisions, and choice that they have been made in the election are varied. But usually, as a political scientist, we are looking at this thing, but in the majoritarian decision, agree that these three will be the major factor that determine how voters, especially in Malaysia, decide when coming to the election ballot. Yeah, number
Yeah.
one, of course, party identification. This is very common when most of the scholars believe that this is the stable factor that determine how Malaysian voters vote by identifying themselves to a certain party. This is also very common in Western countries. For example, in United States, we really see that some people associated themselves as Democrat or as a Republican, but somehow this particular thing have been challenged for a certain time of period due to the emergence of modern elections, as well as the technological advancement in media, social media, in the media. So it really lead to some new kind of development that may determine the preferences of voters during the election rather than identifying themselves to some party. So generally, I will simply say that the setting in the society may play its part, especially when we talk about this in Malaysian setting. Yeah, for example, the number two factor that always regularly associated with Malaysian setting, which is sociological perspective. Yeah, there is preferences of the Malay to see the Malay and Islamic issues that really close to them primordially. If you are looking at the setting uh, by comparing the urban voters, the suburban voters, and the rural voters, yeah, this sociological perspective really play a pivotal role in deciding their choices and translating it in the ballot box. And of course, as I said earlier, the development of modern elections is also have been influenced by the technological advancement, the media settings, so on and so forth. So most of the time, these kind of voters are really putting their rationality, or what we in academic world call this rational choice theory. Yeah, when people will uh, cast their vote according to what they perceive or what have they seen, what have they heard, what have they feel throughout the election years. Yeah, let's say in five set, for example, in 2018, this kind of voters is the vast majority of voters where they are called as a rational and tactical voters when their decision were shaped influentially by the uh, political setting during the time, and most of the time were influenced by the perception that Malaysia are heading towards the bad direction due to the fact that we have a bad leadership. And of course, issues like 1MDB, kleptocracy, so on and so forth, shape their perception. And from that particular perception, they have says that the rational thing to do is to change the government. And of course, you can simply see that thing have already changed tremendously in 2 years when this by-election come, and of course by the so-called state elections in Johor, in Melaka, in Sabah, in Sarawak. You can simply see that how rational choice is some kind of volatile due to the constant changes and increasing unpredictability in our political setting. And of course, the traditional one, let's say, they are also uh, factors like candidates, like general perceptions, and of course issues that may become the setting or the background of the election during the time, that also may contribute to the factors where the voters may use all these things to influence them, and of course later on will be used to be decided in the ballot box.
You've mentioned three factors. Basically, you've said that it's party identification. You said that the social setting, one of the main factors, especially in Malaysian politics, Malaysian elections, and also technological advancement that contribute to choices of voters in the ballot box. With what's happening in since 2018 and the change of government and so on. When we look back at this anti-party hopping bill, do you see that such law actually will serve justice to voters? So maybe you can share with our listeners.
Yeah, this is a very good question, actually. Yeah. Personally, I will simply see that so long the bill does not empower the people, the voters, the real voters, to have the last say at the fate of the MPs who are doing this problem to us. So I believe this bill is still not fully served the purpose. That is my point of view. But at least for a starter, because we are in dire need of this particular bill, because party hopping in Malaysia is not a new thing. It is already happened in Sabah. So you can simply see how devastating the action to our political stability, let alone when we are really need that particular stability in a dire situation when we are hit by COVID-19. Yeah, because on that particular time, it is a very critical situation where we need our government to be focused, to be united in order to get us out from that particular problem. But what have they shown us to us that they're really concentrating on political issue rather than thinking about our situation. So whether it is a comprehensive bill to the voters, I will simply say it is not, because there are so many loopholes, there are so many room for improvement in order to make this particular bill uh, punitive enough. It is like putting the teeth to the tigers, yeah, to make sure that all the MPs are afraid of doing this thing in the near future. So I believe the bill is okay, but it is not comprehensive enough. And that's why I agree with the suggestion from Datuk Sri Azalina Osman side that we need to consider to equip this anti-hopping bill with recall election, because recall election might give the real power to the people to decide upon their MP's fate. Because what happened in United States of America, let's say, taking back the classical example of 2003 in California state situation, when Arnold Schwarzenegger during the time have asked for a recall election to their incumbent governors due to the fact that there is a scandal. So the recall election can be done if they have received a petition, let's say minimum 20% or 12% in the case of California, from from the voters that have cast their vote in the last election. So if this happen, I think it may help to strengthen the anti-hopping bill and put fear to the our MPs, so they are not going to repeat this action anymore. Because for what we have discussed in the earlier discussion, uh, there are still loopholes. Yeah, or what happen if there is no majority? Yeah, if there is a leadership disagreement within the party who command the majority itself. Yeah, let's say they say that we are going to have a vote of no confidence in parliament, and suddenly the camp changed the side to bandwagoning with the opposition to form the government. So this thing is not going to be solved unless we are going to uh, strengthen, or we are going to give some empowerment to the new law. But overall, I should say, uh, the bill, the situation that have been shown by this particular bill uh, enactment, I will rather say that at first we can simply say this enactment will absolutely put some clear cut on substantial law about party hopping, and maybe in the near future we can look at the possibility of having recall election to make it better and comprehensive. But generally speaking, if the law is there for us as for us to at least have some concrete idea on the particular issues. But so long that it is not empower the people, the real voters, and does not put some fear or to put some at least pressure to the MPs, I believe there are rooms for improvement. There are a lot of things to do in order to make this thing comprehensive.
Yeah, I mean, I agree basically with you with regard to how it is a hope that party hopping bill as such, the law as such, will actually discourage elected lawmakers from switching political sides to the extent that it creates instability to the country and so on. Because we know that stability of governments are very important, not just politically, but it's also in terms of economics, in terms of social. It is very important to have a very stable government. They say that anti-party hopping legislation as such, that which was recently passed in Dewan Rakyat, would allow stability of government. What is your view on this? Is it
Yeah,
true? I mean,
there's nothing certain actually, but somehow by having this law, we can simply conclude that there are commitments given by our MP on this particular issue, although they are the one who caused the trouble in the first place. But somehow we need something substantial in order to prevent this thing. And by having the law, I will not say that we are not having any political stability in whatsoever. Still, we can simply say that political stability is something that can we say it is very uncertain. It is very depending on how our politician, whether they have a very big heart or they have strength and commitment to make our political scenario better. So this will solely depend on how they behave, how they react, and how they put their commitment over their personal gain or personal interest or whatsoever. Yeah, because we need to understand that in party hopping, it is not about MPs hopping or crossing the floor to another side. Yeah, it is
Mm,
the severe of the action to the political setting.
mhm,
So by having this law, we are trying to look uh, on the legal side on how we are going to prevent this thing legally. And of course, by time, we can simply learn from this particular law on how we are going to improve. But somehow, whether we need the law in order uh, to make this as a quick remedy for what was happened since Sheraton moved.
mhm,
Definitely, we need this law. Yeah, but the question is whether this law may provide political stability or any preventive measures for any further party hopping in the near future. I can simply say that we need any laws, or we need to learn from this particular thing, and of course we can evolve from this law in the near future, and hopefully from this evolution we can simply create some kind of not try and error, but we can simply say that we learn and we grow from this in order to make our political situation better. And of course, by having this thing, we can simply say this particular law that have been passed by our parliament is the very good beginning for our political development.
mhm. Yeah, but yeah, I agree with you, and I see that this is actually it signals something very important, whereby political parties or MPs from different political sides can actually come together and agree on something which will benefit voters, which will benefit Malaysia in the long run. And
Mhm.
when we talk about this, we actually look forward to other important things that they will agreed upon, to create stability in Malaysia with regard to this. And then maybe as a conclusion, Mr. Mujibu, to our discussion this evening on the topic anti-party hopping, do voters matter? The conclusion that you might want to share with our listeners.
Yeah, welcome. uh, as my conclusion is simple, yeah. Party switching is not good for our political development. We can simply say that I would like to quote a good writing from a scholar named Desposato. He says that
Mhm.
switching party after an election, if it's not curved, would open to a democratic process to disrepute. Because we need to understand that elected representatives are human. They are easily used by any parties, yeah, with promise of economic gains, power, or even threatened by blackmail. So the best way for us to prevent this thing is to having any substantive law that may be enforced, and this
Mhm.
particular law might do some justice to the voters, because
Mhm.
we can simply see how severe our political scenario, how unstable our politics have been uh, done by the hand of the uh, can we say that not corrupted by the unfaithful
Mhm.
uh, MPs, which is not only they are talking about they're doing this for the sake of the people, but they are actually destroying the people in any means. So
Mhm.
that's why uh, for the very beginning, I will simply say that this law is needed, but whether it is comprehensive enough to prevent this thing, I will
Yeah.
simply say no. And
Mhm.
but thank God we are already have the first step that we need to prevent this thing. And this law,
Mhm.
by this law, I hope that we can grow and learn from it. And of course, from this thing, we can develop a comprehensive law by time, inshallah, in the near future.
Inshallah. And with that, I thank you, Mr. Mujibu Abdul Muiz, for being with us today. and for sharing your view on today's topic, which is anti-party hopping, do voters matters. I would like also to thank our listeners who are with here, and also to my producer Haja Mazlina Ismail. To our listeners again, do tune in to our program Open Forum every Sunday at 5 p.m. with more interesting topics. With that, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh.